Medusa.
Arguably the single most gimmicky carry in the game, and yet her gameplay can really be boiled down to being a somewhat more mobile tier 2 tower. Medusa's main gimmick is her innate. She has a permanent mana shield active on her person. The mana shield effectively mitigates most of the damage she takes at the cost of her own mana. The shield gets stronger every level, being able to take more damage per point of mana, and her illusions also have a weaker mana shield when they spawn. It's also worth noting that unlike every other hero in the game, Medusa has 0 strength gain per level, meaning all her extra strength will be coming from items instead. Medusa's Q is her split shot. She can turn this ability on to cause her attacks to deal less damage, but also shoot extra targets around her, much like Gyro's flat cannon. The extra targets are normally unaffected by modifiers like Desolator and Crit. This makes her really fast at farming and great in a team fight at the cost of her auto attacks tickling in comparison to other carries. Speaking of team fighting, she also contributes her ultimate Stone Gaze. Pop this ability and enemies facing Medusa will be greatly slowed, and if they face her direction for too long, they are stunned and take increased physical damage. The power of this ability comes in the fact that the enemy either has to run away or tank a stun. It also feels like it lasts forever and goes through BKB. Outside of her ult, she can also slow enemies with her venomous volley facet. This makes her launch a special arrow every few auto attacks that slows enemy move speed, attack speed, and cast speed. Her snake is a targeted ability, bouncing from nearby target to target, increasing in damage and speed with every jump. After it reaches the max number of jumps or has nobody else to jump to, the snake returns to Medusa. And if the snake is targeted at or bounced to any unit that has a mana bar, she is given a portion of each target's max mana upon its return. With proper usage, she can get a good chunk of her mana back off a single snake. In the lane, this spell can really hurt, and it's not uncommon to see Medusa get a few surprising early game kills just because of how powerful the snake is. Her Ags makes her snakes apply a petrified debuff from her ultimate, with its stun getting longer with every bounce, and her shard causes her to launch a non-bouncing snake at an enemy when they target her with the spell. She also has the engorged facet that empowers your next few autos after using a snake, letting them deal more damage depending on how much mana your snake restores. And as of the latest patch, she has a new ability called Gorgon's Grasp, causing her to shoot a few arrows in a line, damaging and rooting enemies hit, preventing them from turning while also dealing additional damage per second. It combos well with her ultimate and snake, and it's a pretty good CC tool. For your talent choices, Mystic State damage is usually better at 10. Enemies are smart enough to look away from Stone Gaze, so you won't always be able to take advantage of the damage bonus, but the snake damage is always good. Split shot damage penalty at 15, just to make your right clicks hurt a bit more. Gaze duration at 20, a longer ult means more time that the enemy can't fight you, and split shot modifiers at 25. This makes your split shot arrows be able to proc things like Mjolnir, Crit, and more. Also, it's probably one of the more one-sided choices at 25. Why would you ever take the Grasp Volley over split shot mod? Medusa is an incredibly niche pick. Unlike other carries, she doesn't really deal too much burst damage. However, her mana shield makes her incredibly hard to kill in most situations. Her mana shield lets her face tank damage that almost no other carry in the game can, and tends to outlast her foes in drawn-out fights. The fun of playing Medusa is the fact that you actually get to play the game instead of getting one comboed by Storm Spirit or face rolled by Spirit Breaker. Like I said in the beginning, you play like a tower. You auto attack and you survive, and as long as you do both those things, you're gonna win the fight eventually. Medusa is also an incredibly fast farmer. With enough levels in split shot and snake, it's not unheard of to see the snake lady have a manta and butterfly before 20 minutes. Hit your timings and you're really hard to kill. However, there are situations where Medusa seriously struggles. She does very little damage on her own, thus tanks that can reduce her damage even further like Underlord can really hamper her effectiveness. Centaur and Darkseer are also rough matchups because when you pop ult, they haste their teammates and then nobody will look at you, but by far your biggest counter is Anti-Mage and Mana Bird in general. Your mana bar is effectively your HP bar, and when that's gone, you'll usually follow soon after. Medusa is great in deathball lineups. If the enemy can't kill you while they're behind, you're lightly sieging high ground at 25 minutes and without the need for Aegis.
Monkey King.
I have a bit of a personal bias against Monkey King, and it's not because of his gameplay or racism. If you didn't already know, in his hero trailer, he was voiced by the messiah of Dungeons and Dragons, Matt Mercer, and when we got to play him, they changed his voice actor and direction, and then we ended up getting Riki at home. I'm not saying his voice is bad. In fact, I think the VA did a pretty good job as Monkey King. I'm just saying I really wanted Matt Mercer in Dota. Anyway, Monkey King's innate is Mischief. He can turn into all kinds of things like runes, a tree, or even a courier. It's intended to be used for cheese plays, but most people use it for the fact that you have a window of damage immunity upon transformation. Use it to dodge incoming projectiles and stuff if you have fast hands. It's also worth noting that you have an above average attack range for a melee hero. You also have another passive in Jingu Mastery, hit the same enemy 4 times in quick succession, and you're granted a buff to your next 4 autos, giving them bonus damage and lifesteal. Boundless Strike is probably the world's flashiest empowered auto attack. You damage enemies in a line in front of you, dealing a critical hit, plus some bonus damage, and stun them. It's a long range stun, and you can pump fake it for a better shot. It's coded as an auto attack that cannot miss, and it procs things like Jingu. Some MK players will hold this ability until they get the Jingu buff for even bigger numbers. Your Shard gives you the option to leap to the end of the Boundless Strike, giving you an instant engage/disengage tool. It also deals damage based on your Tree Dance/Primal Spring is your second ability. You can leap onto treetops and jump from tree to tree, and then when you're on top of the tree, you can slam it into an area to deal damage and apply a slow, which gets stronger depending on how long you channel the spell. Note that you can't tree dance for a bit after you take damage from any source, and if the tree you're on gets cut, you fall down and get stunned. Your Simian Stride facet makes tree dance have 0 cooldown as long as you're above a certain amount of health. Finally, your ultimate is Wukong's Command. You summon a bunch of Monkey King clones in an area which attack enemy heroes as long as they're inside. While inside, you also get bonus armor. However, if you leave the ring at any point during the duration, the ring and the soldiers vanish. Not in this ability's description is the fact that it absolutely destroys frame rates. You can take the Wukong's Faithful facet to make the ring last longer and also give you a buffer period to let you leave the ring for a bit without it disappearing. Scepter causes your clones to be able to gain Jingu stacks and also makes MK passively summon stationary monkey clones to attack nearby enemy heroes. If MK is nearby, the generated clones will also hit buildings too. For talents, Primal Spring damage at 10, Jingu damage at 15, but if you're not lacking damage, take the Trade Dance cast range for more mobility, Boundless Crit at 20, and Big Ring at 25. Monkey King is a fighter through and through. Unlike certain other carries, he spikes pretty early thanks to the fact that he has a built-in damage buff from Jingu and some pretty strong skirmishing spells in Boundless Strike and his ultimate. MK excels when he has a team that can back him up while he takes early to mid-game brawls. MK is a great pick for teams that need an up-tempo carry that can join in fights early. Your ult zone is your home turf, and while you're not useless without it, you are a lot less scary without your boys to back you up. Thus, heroes that don't have to fight in your zone like Zeus, Muerta, and Sniper become a lot harder to deal with. The former two also ignore your big armor buff with their magic damage output. Viper just ults you, and thus you're useless, and finally Batrider has the means of forcing you out of your zone via his lasso or flame break. Pick Monkey King if your team needs an up-tempo carry that can contribute to team fights early on. He's also a strong flex pick, being a viable mid laner and pos 4 support, so try to pick him early on in the draft if you can.
Morphling.
Morphling is another unique pos 1 carry because of the way he interacts with Dota's attributes. He is either an agility hero or a strength hero depending on his chosen facet. However, strength Morphling is more of a support build, so let's go with Ebb. So his innate means he gets half the attributes he would normally get from a level up at every half level, rather than getting the full bonuses every level. It's not too noticeable, but it does mean you get your stats earlier, which is nice in the early game. Also, when you level stats, you get +4 to all stats instead of just +2. He can manipulate his stats with attribute shift. This lets him convert his strength into agility or vice versa, depending on what he needs for the given situation. So if he's free farming, he can just go pure agi to attack really fast, or if he's getting gone on, he can shift the strength and become really hard to kill. And if you chose strength morph, you get increased cooldown reduction depending on your agility stat. Shard reduces the mana cost of this ability while also allowing you to change stats while stunned. You also have your adaptive strike, which you have 2 versions of. The agility version deals some base damage plus extra damage based on your agility. The strength version doesn't damage at all, but it stuns for a set duration based on your strength. If you chose Agimorph, which you should be doing as a carry, the strength version also knocks targets back. And if you shoot one, the other will go on cooldown for a short time. Waveform is your mobility tool. It lets you dash in a direction, and if you pass through enemies during the dash, they take damage and are attacked for a portion of your own damage. And your ultimate is Morph. You pick an enemy and turn into them, copying their stats and basic abilities. You can freely swap between your morphed enemy and Morphling form at will. You also retain your current HP and mana percentage, so if you're half HP in your Morphling form, when you swap to your copy form, you'll still be at half HP. And if you die in either form, you're just dead. Any buffs that you gained in either form will translate to the other form as well. So let's say you morph into Gyrocopter, you can pop Flak Cannon in Gyro form to gain the Flak buff, turn back into Morphling, and suddenly you're hitting everyone on the enemy team for 300 damage per projectile. Thus, it helps to have a good understanding of Dota's roster to know who's the best person to morph into. Your Scepter upgrade lets you create a strong illusion of the target enemy hero that can use basic abilities. At any point, you can take the place of the illusion, which destroys it, and then it'll just function like your regular ultimate, letting you swap between Morphling form and copy form. For talents, take the Waveform range at 10 for more mobility options, Agility at 15 for unconditional free stats, Waveform attack buff at 20 for more damage, and Waveform cooldown at 25 for even more mobility. Morphling is a specialist hero that is only really played in a few key situations, and even then only piloted by a dedicated player base. He's one of the hardest carries to use effectively because of how insanely high his skill ceiling is. However, when piloted well and in the right game, Morphling can feel completely unkillable, being slippery with his waveform and tanky with his strength shift. A good Morphling is constantly testing his limits, and it's what you need to do to get the most out of his weird kit. He does have quite a few hard counters though. Silences and stuns are quite annoying to deal with as Morphling, since he needs to use his waveform and shift to stay alive, so heroes like Nyx Assassin and Earth Spirit are a pain to deal with. In the same vein, Anti-Mage and PL burn Morph's mana to the point that he can't shift much either. And you can't talk about Morphling counters without mentioning Ancient Apparition. He just lightly grazes you with his ult and suddenly you're not allowed to play the game anymore. Pick Morphling if you want to learn Morphling. As a specialist hero, he takes a lot of time to learn, but you will be rewarded with one of the most imbalanced heroes in the game in the right hands.
Muerta.
So I already covered Muerta as a support, mainly because of pro play. In higher level play, you'll see a lot of Muerta support because she's a strong flex pick. However, her natural role is still that of a carry. After all, that's what she was designed to do. I'm going to assume you already watched the supports video where she was featured in, so I won't be going into the ins and outs of her kit anymore. But since then, it is worth mentioning that Ofrenda did get a buff, and I like it a lot more now. In addition to having the utility of a tactical insertion, you get attack speed while you're near it. Though honestly, I still think Dance of the Dead is better because with a numbers tweak, this spell could honestly be an ultimate, and having the ability to potentially double the duration is pretty fucking nutty. But as a carry for talent's sake, Deadshot cast range at 10, Gunslinger damage at 15 for more right click damage, Deadshot charges at 20 for more utility, and Gunslinger chance at 25. Muerta's gimmick of magic damage attacks means that she's a huge threat throughout all stages of the game. Agility carries in particular get naturally high base armor due to agility growth and items. Muerta just ignores that with her autos during her ult. But the issue with Muerta is that her window of opportunity with her ultimate is incredibly tight. But with Yule Scepters, tank meta, force staves, and glimmers, it's just so challenging to be able to maximize those precious seconds you get as Muerta. And because you're ranged, you're not exactly a natural nullifier buyer either. Muerta's biggest weakness as a carry are enemies that can kite her ult. Centaur's R is a big disengage button, and you're really not killing him once he buys Eternal Shroud, and Axe and Spectre can just face tank your damage. You also lack a reliable way to deal with Zoo heroes, so characters like Lycan and Brute can just run you down with their armies. Mobility creep is a real thing in Dota, and Muerta was designed without any mobility tools. And while that's good for the overall direction of the game, it does make her suffer in terms of viability. She also takes a while to come online, needing damage items, a BKB, and more. And as a carry, Muerta kinda just feels outclassed right now. Hopefully she gets a buff sometime soon.
Naga Siren.
Like Medusa, Gyro, and Luna, Naga is a tempo carry, but unlike them, she has an illusion gimmick. Her first spell is Mirror Image, dispelling basic debuffs and then spawning a few illusions of her. Her eel skin innate gives her bonus evasion the more Naga Sirens around her, which really just means as long as she's near her illusions, she gets bonus evasion. She has a net which is a point and click route that lasts for almost 3 seconds at level 1, which I believe is the longest level 1 immobilization tool in the game for a basic ability. Upon rooting a unit, she can also reel them in, forcing them to move towards her while she channels. Scepter increases the cast range and speed of your net and allows your net to lock down debuff immune targets. Your third spell depends on your chosen facet. Riptide makes every few auto attacks release a splash around you, dealing damage and reducing enemy armor, and note that illusion attacks count towards this counter, and the water splash is also created around any illusions that Naga has. On the other hand, Deluge is an activated ability that causes her to splash some water around herself and her illusions. Enemies hit by the Deluge take damage and have reduced max move speed and status resistance. Riptide is a lot better for farming and is a lot less mana intensive, and Deluge is better on a support. Your ultimate is Song of the Siren, causing you to sing a song, placing enemies around you into a magical stasis. She's probably singing a song from Taylor Swift's Midnight's album because honestly, that one was pretty mid. Enemies cannot attack nor be attacked under this stasis, but certain displacement abilities like Darkseer's Vacuum can work. Allies within the song also gain increased health regen, and enemies with debuff immunity are unaffected. Note that Naga can freely net and reel in targets during her ultimate. Shard increases the allied healing and adds mana regen for allies. And you should only really use this ability in 3 situations: at the very start of the fight so your team can set up, as a get out of jail free card, or as a reset button if things look grim. It is very easy to troll your teammates by singing the song at a wrong time. For talents, Riptide damage at 10 because you shouldn't be taking Deluge as a carry, Mirror Image damage at 15, Mirror Image Illusion at 20, and Mirror Image cooldown at 25, but take the net breaks if you need it. Naga's game plan is very simple. You stay in the lane and then you send your illusions to the jungle to farm camps. And then vice versa if the lane's unsafe to farm. Because of her ability to farm 2 places at once, she farms really fast, and if you've noticed a pattern, heroes that naturally farm fast are typically played as tempo carries. A squad of Nagas can be very hard to kill, especially in the early game when things like MKB and BKB are out of the question. However, Naga does fall off pretty hard late game once enemies are able to deal with her illusion army. And of course, being an illusion hero, she is naturally countered by AoE damage and control, like from Leshrac, Axe, Lina, and Sand King. To win games as Naga, you need to farm fast and end when you're strong and your enemy isn't. You're also strong against slippery enemies because you can sing into net to ensure you lock them down. Naga's a really fun character, especially in a coordinated setting because of how fast she farms and surprisingly easy she is to play, as long as you don't mess up your ultimate, and in case you're wondering, smash.
Phantom Assassin.
The second most played hero in Dota, behind only Pudge, whom I feel I've talked about enough on this channel. Phantom Assassin is a simple carry and yet incredibly fun to play. I know a lot of people have been looking forward to me talking about her, and I'm finally doing it, but before I get into her kit, remember to leave a like and a comment down below to help the channel out, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. This ensures that I get to keep making videos like this one. PA's innate gives her passive evasion that scales with her level. This makes her surprisingly hard to kill unless you itemize against her properly. Phantom Assassin's first spell is her iconic dagger. She shoots out a dagger that functions as an auto attack, meaning it applies modifiers and can crit. The dagger also applies a slow and grants vision over any affected enemies. Phantom Strike is your mobility tool, and it lets you blink right next to a target unit. If blinking on an enemy, you get a short attack speed buff, and you can also blink on allies for a quick getaway too. Blur is a weird self buff. She disjoints incoming projectiles on cast, increases her move speed, and causes herself to be hidden on the minimap for the duration of this ability. However, you can still see her position if you have vision of her, and the buff is removed upon getting too close to an enemy hero, tower, or outpost, or if she attacks. While blurred, PA cannot be targeted by enemy abilities. The Veiled One facet lets PA attack without breaking blur and reduces her mana cost during and after blur. Scepter causes this ability to have an instant cast time, halves its cooldown, and reduces the cooldown of her basic abilities upon getting a kill. Use this ability when traversing the map for the move speed boost and to hide from enemy wards, or in combat to mess with enemy targeting. Shard gives you Fan of Knives, which causes you to deal damage to enemies around you, doing max health damage and applying a break. And your ultimate is Coup de Grace, which gives your attacks and dagger a chance to grant you the Deadly Focus buff. When you have this buff, your next auto or knife will deal massive critical damage. Note that your dagger has an increased chance to generate the Deadly Focus buff too. The Methodical facet increases the crit damage while also replacing the chance to generate the Deadly Focus buff with a hit counter, meaning if you strike the same opponent 6 times, you hit him with a big crit. The hit counter is lower against non-hero units, and your dagger adds 2 stacks to a target's hit counter instead of just 1. I think Methodical is the better facet purely because it removes your chance to get unlucky. Sure, it removes the potential for double crits too, but it also means you're guaranteed your big crit after a number of hits. And with a dagger counting for 2 stacks, it's actually not as bad as you might think. I am a Methodical believer, but I can understand if you're not. For talents, Phantom Strike duration at 10, Phantom Strike cast range at 15, but take the evasion if you need it, dagger damage at 20, and more frequent ults at 25. This translates to a higher crit chance if you chose Veiled One, and 1 less hit needed for Methodical. Phantom Assassin is a squishy destroyer. Anybody with a small HP bar is fair game when you pick PA. You deal insane physical burst damage and absolutely take over games if you can get ahead. PA's issue is that she takes time to farm up though. She has no natural farming mechanism in her kit, meaning she wants a Battle Fury and she needs a BKB in most games because she's a squishy melee hero. Otherwise, she'll get stun locked and die before seeing her first big crit. Thus, she struggles against enemies that either ruin her laning stage and delay her power spikes, or enemies that come online faster and end the game before she can even be relevant. She was also designed to blow up squishies, therefore she's not the best pick against tanks. Axe is the perfect example of a PA counter, a lane bully, an armor stacker, and can disable PA even through BKB. However, she's also a strong pick against a lot of right clickers because she forces them to devote an item slot towards an MKB or a Silver Edge. Heroes like Anti-Mage and Huskar don't really tend to build either, thus she has an advantage in the head-to-head matchup. Pick Phantom Assassin if you just want to have fun. There's just something about seeing her big red numbers on screen that no other hero can really capture. That, and she has some of the best cosmetics in the game.
Phantom Lancer.
Just pick Chaos Knight, he's way better. Phantom Lancer's innate means that he gets base damage from damage bonuses from buffs and items. This means his illusions get bonus damage too. This mainly means his illusions benefit whenever he builds raw damage items like Daedalus and Divine Rapier. His Q is Spirit Lance. He shoots out a projectile that damages an opponent upon hitting them, slowing them and creating an illusion of PL. Scepter causes this ability to bounce twice, prioritizing heroes within range and increasing the damage of the created illusions. Doppelganger is your escape tool, causing you and any illusions you may have to vanish momentarily, and then after a delay, you and your illusions are respawned at a random position within the target location. This ability also creates 2 illusions, one that deals normal illusion damage while taking extra bonus damage, and one that deals no damage but takes less damage. It's a chaotic reshuffle tool, and it also applies a basic dispel, which is nice. The Convergence facet makes this ability spawn extra illusions depending on your missing health. Phantom Rush is a passive that lets you and your illusions run towards an enemy within range. Once in range, you gain bonus agility for a very brief period. And your ultimate is Juxtapose, giving you a chance to create an illusion with every auto attack. Your illusions can also make illusions, but the chance to spawn one is greater when attacking with the main PL. The Divergence facet increases the illusion damage and causes them to spawn to attack random nearby units, but makes Juxtapose illusions uncontrollable. Shard lets you activate Juxtapose, allowing you to spawn an illusion and go invisible and gain a brief move speed buff. It's an escape tool and can very easily catch enemies off guard if they don't realize you have a shard. For talents, I think the axe build is the only viable way to play this guy at this point in time. Trying to go any other build just kind of feels horrible. That means Spirit Lance damage at 10, and while the Spirit Lance cooldown does make sense, the Phantom Rush Agi is a lot stronger with a 266 increase in duration, and it's just so valuable at 15, Phantom Rush range at 20, and then Doppelganger CD at 25. Phantom Lance's whole gimmick is overwhelming enemy heroes with sheer numbers, but in the current state of the game, PL is just entirely outclassed by Chaos Knight in that regard, and while PL does farm faster, Chaos Knight spikes earlier, needing less items to be effective. And because of that statement, more people are gonna pick Chaos Knight more, and when you see the enemy pick Chaos Knight, that's when you pick PL and take your free MMR. In fact, pick Phantom Lancer against comps that are heavily single target oriented. This means against heroes like Bane and Vengeful Spirit, just to name a few. Unlike other illusion heroes, Phantom Lancer's illusions aren't gated behind a cooldown nor ability. He can just constantly create swarms of himself and keep the fight going as long as PL Prime stays alive. However, his illusions are also quite fragile, so he's not too good against AoE damage from heroes like Sand King, Leshrac, and the classic PL counter, Earthshaker. There are also quite a few ways that people can find PL Prime. For example, if Windranger can focus fire the main PL before he makes an army, he's dead in the water, and Grimstroke's ult when targeting another enemy hero will only leash to the main PL as well. Back in the day, this hero was known as the Cancer Lancer because he was just so obnoxious to play against and a highly contested pick every game in top tier play. Now he's more of a niche pick against certain team comps. He's not a strong pick in most games, but in the games he is, he reminds people why he was so heavily nerfed in the first place.
Riki.
The last hero for the video, Riki Maru or just Riki, is the bane of low-level pubs everywhere. It's the same reason why the league champion Evelynn is incredibly hated. 2 words: permanent invisibility. His ultimate is Cloak and Dagger. He just fades into invisibility after not attacking. Unlike other sources of invis, this only breaks when attacking. That means Riki can cast spells and use items without fear of breaking his cover. Illusions of Riki also get the invisibility, so if you have a Manta or an illusion rune, you can use it for scouting. His innate is Backstab. Upon hitting an enemy from behind, he deals bonus damage based on his agility. And with a contract killer facet, he also gains bonus experience from kills and assists on enemy heroes, making him a powerful snowballing pick. Another iconic ability is his smoke, which silences enemies inside of it and applies a partial blind. Unlike a lot of other silences, this smoke is not a debuff and thus can't be purged with an item or spell. Shard causes the smoke to reduce armor and has the unique effect of causing enemies to be unable to use spells or items on any teammates inside. It's a very powerful shard against saving heroes like Dazzle and Oracle. To get on top of foes, or more importantly, behind them, Riki has Blink Strike. You blink behind the enemy and attack them, dealing bonus damage, while also applying a brief but powerful slow. You get 2 charges of Blink Strike and can also target allies. You also get Tricks of the Trade, allowing you to vanish and attack random targets in an area. While using this ability, you are untargetable and your attack damage is greatly reduced, but your agility is increased and you hit targets from behind, proccing Backstab. The Exterminator facet drastically increases your bonus agility during this spell when attacking non-hero units, and your Scepter also empowers this ability, increasing your cast range, number of attacks, and letting you hit an additional unit per strike, and you can also target an ally to center your tricks around them. For talents, the smoke radius is really annoying to play against, so take that at 10. Trick's agility increase at 50 is nice, especially if you take Exterminator. Backstab multiplier at 20 for more damage, and Trick's cooldown at 25, but take the Dispel if you need it. It lets you use its spell while rooted and leashed. The power of Riki is the fact that by picking him, your opponents are already forced to buy detection items like Gem, Dust, and Sentries. This, by design, puts your team at a gold advantage because your enemy supports will be forced to itemize against you. Also, try not to pick Riki when you already have an Invis hero on your team. This increases the value enemy supports get from buying detection, thus lowering your intrinsic advantage. In a team fight, you won't be relying on your invisibility to stay alive. Instead, you have 2 really powerful mobility tools in Tricks and your Blink Strike. While your smoke is incredibly disruptive, you're hard to kill because you're jumping and juking big spells everywhere in a clash, and if you add BKB on top of that, you're just never getting caught if you're smart. Being an assassin, he doesn't particularly do well against tanks. And your main counters are stuns and silences from heroes like Tiny and Night Stalker. Heroes like Bounty Hunter, Slardar, and Zeus can also reveal your invis, rendering your ultimate useless. And a shout out goes to Bristleback because what are you supposed to do against him? Like, seriously, what? Build Silver Edge? And that's it for part 2. Like, comment, and subscribe for part 3. That's all for now, and ace out.